Hello everyone. Thank you for coming in these large numbers. It seems we're more than last time when I was here. I skipped last month, but I'm trying to come every 4 weeks to Alchemist Kitchen. It's a beautiful space. I'm very, very happy and proud to be part of the inaugural team, so to speak, of launching this, because I can already tell it's going to be difficult for further speakers in the future to get a slot here. So I'm glad I have mine. So my history with consciousness, because this talk is, of course, is about plant medicines, but the plant medicines I see are a tool for the refinement, the development of consciousness. And this is what alchemy really is about. Alchemy is about the transformation of consciousness, from a lower to a higher consciousness. And my journey in human consciousness started when I was 13 years old, and I discovered the Tibetan Book of the Dead in my parents' bookshelf. The Tim Leary Alpert, now Ram Dass version of the book, not the original, and I found it fascinating what was described in the bardos and the methodology, and got very much into it very deeply, very quickly, but came to realize within the first year that while this practice is very powerful, very deep and very insightful, it doesn't open itself up so easily to the broad spectrum of the population, because it requires a lot of work on your own side, a lot of dedication, preparation, fasting, all of this, and we are very far away from that in our society, which is more about distraction and about distributing your energy rather than keeping it together, so to speak. So for me, it became pretty clear how powerful and how transformational this work is with consciousness, because ultimately your mind creates your reality. Your mind projects your body and everything around it, everything that exists. So of course, everything that you encounter is created by your mind as well. So this is why healing can only come from changing the state of your mind, from changing the programs that are the patterns, the behavior that is stored in there. And while, of course, there's no method that is inherently more powerful or better than any other, it is how easy it is accessible that makes the method powerful in the cultural context of the method. And while obviously in Tibet, they don't have the challenge of the distraction that we have here, it's much easier for them to go into an altered state just by itself. There's not much practice needed. But here, you can't even sit anyone still and watch a YouTube video for 5 minutes, So how can you expect them to do long-winded meditations, right? So I'm not saying there's no people doing it, but it's just not, our cultural context for that doesn't really exist. So, but what we do have, we have a culture of disempowerment. We believe in external things and external forces ruling us. So one is the belief in medicine as such, that there are things out there, doctors, people that are not us, that know what's wrong with us better than ourselves, that are medicines that can fix us. We don't need to do anything, we just need to take this pill or take this prescription or this powder and it will fix us. So of course, this is a paradigm we all know and we've grown up with. Everybody knows when you're sick, your mom or your dad, they will take you to the doctor will write a prescription, you will go to the pharmacy, you get this stuff and you take it and you'll be better after a few days. So this program runs so unconsciously that we believe in this physical presence of the medicine. So how can we utilize that in order to raise consciousness in a more sustainable way without depending on external stimuli, so to speak? And that doesn't even include just medicine. Medicine is just something that vibrates slow enough to be physical, but things that vibrate higher are not physical and still medicine. Medicine's energy. So the idea is to find a medicine that is energy medicine, but it also seems on the surface to be a physical medicine. And I found plants are a fantastic way to do that. How do we interact with our environment is through plants. Even the most determined meat eater, they will eat some plants. So that means everyone, except maybe for the Inuit and very few exceptions, every human being eats plants. So this is our way of interacting with the planet, of getting obviously the first thing that the plants provide us is sunlight condensated down into matter that we can absorb, because we can't transform sunlight into energy and live of it. But then plants also provide the healing substances. So by interacting with plants in this way, we break down the first barrier in order to work with energy medicine or work with altered states of consciousness, because we believe we're doing what we've always been doing. When something's wrong, we're taking something. So that works. So, and what happens is when you bring people in that context to use medicine, they take the medicine, and of course, you have the benefit of the 15% placebo effect. You know, the placebo effect accounts for 15% either way of something working more or less, if you believe in it. This is why homeopathy works for some, and it doesn't work for others. It always works, it's just that 15% that you don't believe in it is enough for it not to show enough effect that you can discard it. On the other hand, if I, the doctor, give you something, the medicine, and you drink it, the 50% are on my side, or on your side, effectively. So you drink the medicine, something happens, and then your worldview shifts, and you understand that it is not the medicine, it is you who is the medicine, right? So now, well, this is the normal paradigm for working with sacred plants. You know, we all, I assume, all have worked with some sort of mind-altering substance or plants, and that doesn't have to be ayahuasca or San Pedro or iboga or mushrooms or LSD. Coffee, mind-altering. Sugar, mind-altering. Alcohol, mind-altering. So I would say there's no one in this room who hasn't ingested mind-altering plants or substances. It's probably safe to say. But the thing is, the next level down, when you come past the actual experience of the work with the plants, is the resistance of your ego, because there's more than just yourself in this flashback, right? So there is also the ego, which is a part of your psyche, the egoic mind, that is very much happy to think that, to make you believe that there can only be one, and there's only one, only the ego. The ego is you, you're the ego, you are your body, that's it. And so once that is challenged, we've just done that by ingesting mind-altering plants, the ego will of course fight against that. And because the world, how we perceive it is how we are, not how it is, our ego will create proof for the fact that we shouldn't be doing this, or this isn't working, or it will deconstruct. I mean, how many people have done, it doesn't even have to be ceremonial work, it can be work with a therapist in a psychotherapeutic setting, where the ego, because the ego is obviously subject as well as object, and also where the ego is just finding excuses or explanations for why everything's fine and actually no work is needed and everything's in order, and we might as well go home and watch a movie and have a pizza instead of sitting in the dark with 20 other people and drinking this vile liquid. You know? So the ego is doing that constantly. So the ego starts, of course, once it knows about it, it will start the work prior to the ceremony, but it will definitely start during the ceremony, and it will work after the ceremony. And this is why often people come out of the work, that's maybe a more abstract term for that, come out of the work and they feel very good, they have had a lot of insights, they change things in their life, bigger and smaller things, and 4 weeks later everything's back to the old, how it always was. And so that is very interesting. That is because of the steady drop of the ego, just, you know, trying to reassert its position, you know, of dominance in your mind. So you can obviously, of course, do exercises to take the ego head on. The problem with that is always the more energy you put into something that includes fighting something, the stronger you make it. So, you know, fighting cancer will make you not very healthy, of course, you know, although that seems, for us, doesn't seem very, it seems counterintuitive, but the mind doesn't know the negation, it doesn't know the not. So if you said, I don't want this, you're actually saying, I want this. You're inviting it into your life. And fighting against something, you still have that something in your mind. And even though you're fighting it, you're still projecting that energy. So in order to get around that, you know, the only thing you can do is obviously discipline practice, like meditation. Vipassana is a very good practice, for instance, things like that. But that's again laborious and brings us back to the conundrum I had when I was 14. People don't do that because people want to take the medicine and just close their eyes and go home and everything's fine, and they do it again maybe if they need to, maybe. You know, I often hear that when people do a ceremony and they're like, yeah, I don't need to do this again. I know everything. I always use the example of brushing your teeth. Once you brush your teeth, they feel great, right? squidgy clean, and then a week later they don't feel so great anymore, you know, so you might have to do it again. It's the same with plant medicine. It's a practice, you know, it's not a once-off. And of course, the idea of it being a once-off comes from the ego, which is telling you, oh, it's your gut feeling. You don't need this. It's your gut feeling, it's not your ego. That's the ego. So, way around that, which is very easy, is to use guerrilla tactics. How do you fight an enemy that's stronger than you? Because of course, the ego is in control of almost everything. And you know, you can work your way towards a stage where you can get a level head with it, but it is in the strong position. It's been there for decades, you know. You've just discovered that you can actually negotiate, but the ego doesn't want that. So the way to do it is to not even tantalize it, to not even, you know, ask it, invite it on a direct head-on, but just say, look, we're just going to pretend we're not going to do this work. That's where microdosing comes in. Microdosing, again, in our very material world, seems, again, counterintuitive. We believe that more is more, and the more we take of something, the more effect we will have. And probably everyone will have noticed that in ceremonies when people drink 2, 3, 4, 5 cups, in the hope of, I don't know what they're hoping for, but it's quite interesting. A good friend of mine from South Africa, he was in Brazil at the Spirit Vine, Dr. Sylvia Polivo's retreat, and they do 2 ceremonies in a 10-day retreat. And so he did his first ceremony, and said it was too weak, he didn't really get in. And so he was conversing with a doctor, and she said, you need to drink less. And he says, you don't understand, I didn't get in, so of course he was postulating he would need more. So it took him a few days to kind of debate that internally, and what he did in the end, he agreed to listen to the doctor, and he took less, and it was the most amazing experience he ever had. So there he conquered his ego, because of course the ego wants more, you know, but that's, again, that is also our addictive nature. Human beings have we get addicted to everything, from yoga to marathon to sports to work to ayahuasca ceremonies. You know, it's very difficult not to get addicted. That's just in our nature. So breaking that by saying, yes, I'm going the other direction, that's a good thing, and it worked for him. So in order to completely avoid that, you can use microdosing. You know, the microdosing is a sub-perceptual amount of the substance you're using normally to do the full therapy. And it's not about the cumulative effect. It's been known for quite a while that we have legal limits for certain substances, including lead and BPA and DDT and all of these things. And they thought, yeah, as long as we stay mercury levels below 30 milligrams, it's fine. Until we realized that there is no safe level for most of these things. Actually, there's probably no safe level for anything, because they found that these tiny amounts that are not even measurable have such profound effect on an organism, so that, you know, we can see that, and that again is one of the confirmations for Hahnemann's homeopathy, because what he's doing is he's diluting things every time, diluting until there's literally nothing left in the water apart from water, and there's still an effect. So the dilution actually creates a potentiation of the energy, you know. So this would be, I wouldn't say a fully scientific, but it's an anecdotal evidence already for the minimum dose approach. So, like I said, we have a distinct, measurable effect. You know, I'm actually part of 2 studies currently that are being conducted that are trying to get scientific measure behind microdosing, because, like I said, most of the data we have about this is more anecdotal, but we're now working with neuroscientists on that in order to get more firm data on this. And so the effects are measurable, but the ego doesn't notice it. And this is exactly, so you get the double whammy. So you don't get the resistance of the ego, because the ego thinks nothing's going on. That's the guerrilla part of the work. You know, while the troops are not visible to the enemy won't fight back, so the ego will remain in its dormant state, because while the ego is awake, you're sleeping. You know, all of us, including myself now, we're all asleep now. You know, we're not awake. The ego is keeping us asleep. So the ego doesn't want us to wake up, because then when we get into the now, then there's no need for the ego. And the ego, like every living being, every organism, physical or energetic, wants to have a reason for being, wants to be alive. And so that's just for the ego, it's the same way. It's like the mosquito, we might not like it, but the mosquito wants to live, so your ego wants to live too. You have to understand that. It's the same in taming an elephant. It's no use to be annoyed with the elephant for doing what an elephant does. You have to live with how the elephant works. Same with the mosquito, same with the ego. You have to work with it, not against it, in order to come to a useful, because the ego is a tool, it's a useful tool. Without the ego, again, none of us would be here right now. We wouldn't, that building wouldn't exist. The ego is very useful at times, and it is responsible for the basic survival and the basic functions of our mind, and it's very powerful. I mean, the things we can do, we can build spaceships, we create art. All of these things are done by our mind. But at the same time, the ego is not concerned with any higher functions. For it's all about survival, procreation, eating, sleeping. That's literally that's the concerns. Everything beyond, above and beyond that is more a potential danger than a potential help for the ego. So it's going to suppress all of these, and that would reduce us from living to just being alive. And that human life, especially the human incarnation, is about much more than just procreation and eating and, So in order to get to that point, we need to understand, and we need to make the ego understand there's a time and place for everything. And the ego has its time and place, which is potentially 90% or 90x% of the time, it's the right tool for the job. But when it isn't, it really isn't. So that's when we need to make sure that the ego understands that we're not going to switch it off, pull the plug, we're just going to have it rest for a while. And this is a very good description also for the work with ayahuasca. You put the ego on the passenger seat for a while. The ego is just going to have to watch. And we all know that, I guess everyone here is a driver. So when you drive your car, you feel relatively safe while you're driving it. Put yourself on the passenger seat and you don't feel so good anymore. Put yourself in the back of a car or a bus. Even worse. And if you're sitting in a plane and the pilot's behind that door, people are afraid that they're more afraid in the plane than in the car, even though statistically I think it's like 100,000 times more likely that they're going to have an accident in the car while driving themselves. But that's statistics. We don't get that, So the mind just can't deal with it because it feels disempowered. It doesn't feel in control of the situation. That's why it becomes afraid, because it's the unknown. The ego doesn't like the unknown. The ego spends most of its time calculating possible futures, 99.999% of which will never happen, but they'll give us sleepless nights regardless. And then we ruminate about stuff that has already happened that we can't change anymore, that will give us sleepless nights as well, and gray hair. So that's what the ego does as well, when it's not busy doing useful stuff. So in order to work with that, microdosing seems to be a very good approach. And so microdosing has become popular, I'd say, in the last 2 years, probably at the entry into the consciousness is here, especially was via LSD. LSD is an interesting candidate, and LSD microdosing was used in Silicon Valley because it's a very mental experience. LSD is very different from the work you do with plants, for instance. Mushrooms, again, are not plants, they're fungi, and also a different species as well. They also give a completely different experience. So if you look at LSD, because it doesn't come from a plant, it doesn't have that connectedness into the physical world, into the body, into the environment. So this is why work on LSD, that can work for your advantage. Professor Stanislav Grof has done fantastic work on psychedelic assisted psychotherapy with LSD. But in general, the experience is too devoid of your physical body. And you not only have a mental body, you have a physical body as well, right? And it's the same as with the ego, you need both. So you need to work with all of them. And so LSD doesn't do that. LSD is a very mental experience, which is why the LSD microdosing is very stimulating, especially for people in jobs that need a lot of mental work, like developers in Silicon Valley, that they live in their heads. So for them, microdosing is more of a performance enhancer. They use it for that. It clears blockages as well, but it is not so life-changing as, for instance, ayahuasca is. I was at a conference a few years back where I was the second speaker of the conference. The gentleman before me was from Switzerland, Professor Charles Widmer, he coined psycholysis, which is psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, where they use MDMA and LSD in psychotherapy. And that was legal in Switzerland from 1963 to like 5 years ago or something. LSD and MDMA, legal. And obviously, of course, in a therapeutic setting, not for the weekend. But there were a lot of hedonists in the psycholysis camp, that's for sure. And so I was the next speaker, and it was an entheogen conference, so I was the only person talking about plants there. That was also quite interesting. And so, of course, the question was, why ayahuasca? First of all, what is it and why ayahuasca? And so I was explaining that in my practice, because when I started out, I started holding ceremonies from the age of 15. For me, I didn't have access to ayahuasca back then. So I was using other plants and other materials as well for that. And I said, I've worked with everything, literally, and found that when I found my way to ayahuasca, that there's a distinct difference between working with especially ayahuasca and other mind-altering substances. And that is that the sustainability of the changes is very, very different. While people have amazing insights on LSD or other things, and suddenly everything becomes clear, right? But a day later, their life is exactly the same as 3 days earlier, which means that what they had was an amazing experience, and they feel very happy about knowing everything now, but most likely they've forgotten it, but they're not doing it. With ayahuasca, I found that the actual percentage of implementation of what you learn, and often you don't even consciously have those insights in ayahuasca. You don't even need to experience anything on ayahuasca and your life will change profoundly. Right? And so this is what I've noticed. There's a fundamental difference. And so Professor Widmer was still in the audience at my talk, and he actually got up and says, yes, that is his observation as well, which is why he stopped using LSD and MDMA 10 years ago, and he's now using ayahuasca as well for his psycholysis therapy. So it is really the substance of choice, or the plant of choice. And so then obviously it would also lend itself to doing microdosing with it, seeing how immensely effective and how immensely successful microdosing with LSD is, or microdosing with mushrooms, of course. You see, microdosing with ayahuasca has one distinct advantage. There's no country in the world where LSD is legal. Most countries not even for clinical use. There's virtually no country where mushrooms are legal. I don't know, apart from France and Australia, any country where Banistopsis carpi is illegal. It's not illegal in the United States. It's not illegal in Europe. It's not illegal in Canada, right? This is not an illegal substance, which means a microdosing made out of it is not an illegal substance. So that is a game changer. While I'm not saying that microdosing with other substances is an essential problem, it definitely has a legal aspect to it, right? Because it needs to be produced, it needs to be distributed, whoever sells it is basically trafficking. So while the legislation on that will change soon, I know that, especially for the Johns Hopkins studies done on mushrooms, it's not going to be long, but it hasn't happened yet. So for now, I cannot condone using illegal substances, of course, because that is no one should do that. No one should condone breaking the law. The good thing, like I said, is with the ayahuasca, for instance, you're not. The plant can legally be traded, can legally be used, and so that means everything you make out of it is legal too. And this is why I've been producing my microdosing for more than 3 years now, and have seen a surge in the last 12 months because of, Forbes magazine. There were 2 articles in Forbes magazine on microdosing, right? This is not like the High Times. This is Forbes magazine, So this is proper mainstream press, and so I'm very happy about that, and I know that more and more interest is garnered on that. Like I said, we're doing clinical trials now, and this will also make way. And of course, the legislation changes around cannabis are making way for this too. Who would have thought 5 years ago that we would all be sitting here and it would be legal, almost federally? Shortly before this happening. This is like, I would have never thought it would ever happen on this continent, to be honest. Coming from Europe, it's quite interesting where the laws are a bit more lax, but now they're more lax here, just like overnight, which is beautiful. Cannabis, of course, lends itself to microdosing as well. There's various approaches to that. There's the classic microdosing, which works for oil-based extracts, which works for LSD, works for mushrooms. But the next step that I've done is, in order to magnify the effects of the microdosing, is that I've looked at the various methodologies and systematics of plants. And one of them is similar to what Rudolf Steiner's teachings refer to, that we look at a plant of containing three bodies, three elements as well, as we do, as every alchemical element does. And so that is the body, the mind, and the spirit of the plant. And you find that as well in the root, the stem, and the branches, or you find that in the physical properties of the parts of the plant. So the body, mind, and spirit all together form the whole person. That's the same with the human, the same as with the plant. If you do take a plant and cook it, you only get one of those three. So that means you're not having the whole plant. If I only take your body and not your mind and your spirit, I don't have you, I have your body. So every oil-based cannabis tincture is not a cannabis tincture, it's a THC tincture, because you're not taking the body of the plant into the tincture. See, it's not really the whole plant. Same with LSD, of course, because it's not a plant, it doesn't have the whole thing. With mushrooms, I'm sure you can make a Spagyric extract. I haven't tried it yet, again, legal reasons, but I'm very keen to do that as soon as the legislation changes. But what you have to do is you have to understand that the three phases of the plant are also based on their physical properties. So the spirit of the plant is the most ephemeral, the most volatile of those. It's like the essential oils. Any one of you who has ever had a piece of fresh ayahuasca vine and smell it, it smells comfrey and minty. It has a very rich, minty smell. It doesn't smell like what we drink, right? So it has a very distinct different smell. As soon as you cook it, that's gone. It doesn't smell at all like that anymore. At best, it smells disgusting, you know. And it tastes not very nice either, you know. So and that's part of the deal. It has to actually. It's part of the commitment to the ceremony that the medicine is not easy to drink. It's not to torture you. It's made to show your commitment to the process, that you have to at least get it done. You know? And so the first phase is essential oils, volatile substances, and so they usually get extracted either by water, steam distillation. You can use ethanolic or other alcoholic distillations. You can probably use carbon dioxide, butane. All of these is possible. What works for cannabis, of course, works for other plants too. So you extract that first phase and put it aside. So the next phase is what we commonly refer to as the medicine of the plant, which is the liquid extract. So you cook it, or you use a watery ethanolic solution, and you extract the broadest, it's the broadest extraction spectrum. So you get most alkaloids, you get fatty substances, you get steroids, all of the stuff that is in there will be in the, this is why this is mostly used to tea. It contains most of the parts of the plant. So once that's done, you might recombine those, and then you think you have it, but you're still missing the body. So the body, what's the body? Our body is like a living crystal. You know, our bones are crystals, and because of the structure, the calcium, the magnesium, and the way they are, they're almost like antenna. And so in the same way, the plants also have these crystal antennas, because inside each fiber, each cell of the plant, there are minerals that you cannot extract from the plant any other way other than getting rid of the fiber. So how can you do that? You know, the fiber is you know, even if you juice it, even if you press it, even if you would make a smoothie out of it, you wouldn't break the fiber down enough to extract the stuff that's at the very core of the plant. So what you have to do, once you set aside the first two phases, the mind and the spirit of the plant, you take the leftover, so to speak, which is the pure fiber of the plant, you dry it, and then it needs to be soaked in a propyl alcohol, and is then incinerated into a white ash. It needs to be white. As long as it's black, there's still carbon in there, which means there's still fiber in there. It needs to be burnt until it's a white. It's like mostly offish white. It's a little gray, but it's white. And that white ash, once it cools down, you mix it with water and filter off the sediment, and that creates a highly alkaline ash. And that you mix with the other two phases, and it creates what is called the plant stone. The plant stone is the alchemical representation of the whole plant in a drop. That's like ruby, you know, the ocean in a drop, and the whole plant can be found in every drop. Is the whole plant, because the fiber is not specific to the plant, but the exact combination of the minerals to each other with the other substances from the other phases together form the whole plant, and that is then in every drop, and that then gets diluted in order to create the microdosing. So the microdosing again can be done in the very normal way of just getting ayahuasca from somewhere, or mushrooms or LSD, just diluting it with water. You know, it's much less effective because it doesn't contain the whole plant. You know, they obviously have some effectivity, but it's the same as with eating fresh vitamin C rich fruit and buying vitamin C powder. You know, your extract that is not spagyric is vitamin C powder. Your spagyric extract is the whole fruit that contains the vitamin, it contains the all the provitamins and side minerals, everything that your body needs in order to fully utilize these vitamins. And I mean, looking at vitamins is a good example as well. You know, for a long time we thought, oh yeah, no, of course there's the B vitamin group, we've got A, C, and E, we've got B and K, D, fantastic, we're good. And then they found out, okay, there's at least like 15 times more micronutrients and provitamins, and then you have the cofactor for B12, the intrinsic as well as the extrinsic cofactor. So we end up understanding that the approach of trying to synthesize all the vitamins and minerals we need is not going to work, because there's just too much there. So it's much easier, and this is why, incidentally, also around the same time, I'd say it was about 5 or 6 years ago, food state supplements became very popular, because the food state supplement is, rather than trying to create all the nutrients, it was taking nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables and reducing them to their essence, and then giving that as a vitamin, because then you have everything in there, you know. And so that is the better approach. And the same with the spagyric, is rather than trying to dissect everything into its components and then taking all the components together as a mix, why not just extract the plant that we want to work with as a whole and create a medicine out of that in one? Then we don't need to piecemeal everything. I think it's also fairer to this plant spirit, of course. You know, I don't know if you know, but in my studies in Peru for my shaman apprenticeship, they believe that cutting the vine already takes away its potency. So, I mean, if you buy ayahuasca vines, I mean, and if you get them in the rainforest, they're like, you know, 6 feet. They wouldn't make them much shorter than that. If you get them here, they're like, if they're a foot, they're long, you know. So, and mostly they're shredded. I mean, that is insanity. It's like shredding ayahuasca spirit, you know. Why would people do it? And of course, I understand it's much easier to buy shredded ayahuasca and cook it than to get the whole vine, soak it, pound it, and then break it into the fibers. But as with everything, the more love you put into something, the more love you will get out, right? If I buy a bag of ayahuasca powder and cook it, it's not the same as if I get the vine, dry or fresh. I think that's kind of the same-ish, you know, but ideally fresh, but at least get the whole thing, you know, and not some instant powder that you just put hot water on. And so in order to preserve the spirit of the plant, of course, you wanna get as much of the actual spirit of the plant into the tincture. And this is what the microdosing that I've developed has. And this is what sets it apart from every other microdosing I've ever tried. And we just had a very interesting, this is how the latest study actually came about. Young gentleman that we met incidentally at a conference started using the microdosing, and is his health optimization specialist is a well-known physician, and she is doing regular work, brain scans and electrode work on his head, and he didn't tell her that he was taking the microdosing. It was just that she suddenly said, "Your brain scan is completely different. What are you doing?" So, and this is the basis for this, because she was so fascinated by what was going on with him, like after less than a week of doing the microdosing, how his brain patterns have changed. That she's now, we got the permission, and the study is basically underway already. So, I hope to have results. I hope this year for the study, in order to provide more results for that.